Welcome to Outside Views, where today we're exploring yet another pressing issue emerging from the aftermath of Brexit. How post-Brexit border checks are impacting food security in the UK. Since Brexit, new rules and regulations have affected almost every aspect of life for British businesses and citizens, and now it seems that even the food supply chain isn't immune to the effects of the UK split from the EU. The topic has gained serious attention recently following a joint letter from the Fresh Produce Consortium, the FPC, and the Horticultural Trades Association, the HTA. These two organizations, representing hundreds of businesses, have warned that current border policies are compromising Britain's food security and reducing consumer choice. So let's break down what is happening here. Starting in April of this year, new border checks were introduced on plant and animal products coming from the EU into the UK. The government implemented these checks with the aim of boosting biosecurity, ensuring that any plants and plant products brought into the country are disease-free and don't risk spreading harmful pathogens. Before Brexit, checks on plants coming from the EU were conducted at their final destinations, like nurseries or distribution centers, where they could be inspected and stored in controlled environments. This system allowed importers to keep plants safe and healthy until they were expected. But now, post-Brexit, all checks must be done at designated border control posts as soon as the plants arrive in Britain. So, what's the issue with these new procedures? For starters, the transition hasn't been smooth for many businesses, especially those dealing with fresh produce or live plants. The HTA, representing garden retailers and growers, and the FPC, representing over 700 suppliers of fresh produce, argue that these new rules have resulted in significant challenges. Importers are facing higher costs, delays, and increased paperwork, all of which put immense strain on the logistics of getting fresh produce and plants to the markets on time. And one of the biggest concerns expressed by industry insiders is that these delays could lead to damaged or even unusable products. John Adams, the owner of a plant wholesale company in Hertfordshire, recently shared his experience with the new system. His company, which has been importing plants for over 50 years, has stopped importing certain items like olive trees because of the difficulties imposed by the new checks. Adams has pointed out that these regulations have added around 10% to the cost of deliveries, and delays at the border sometimes last between 7 and 24 hours. This is a massive disruption for his business, as plants and cut flowers are time-sensitive products that can suffer damage if they are kept out of their ideal storage conditions for too long. Another major impact has been on consumer choice. One large retailer, who wished to remain anonymous, claimed that due to the border checks, the variety of plant products available in the UK has decreased by as much as 25% in the last 2 years. And this decline in available products isn't just a matter of inconvenience for consumers. It speaks to a larger issue. British businesses are finding it increasingly challenging to source the range of plants and produce that UK customers have come to expect. But it's not just the ornamental plants and flowers that are affected. British fruit and vegetable growers also rely on EU imports for seeds and young plants, which they then cultivate domestically to produce food. These growers are now facing potential disruptions in their supply chains due to border checks, and the implications for the UK's food security are significant. Earlier this year, the National Farmers Union warned that growers were facing an existential threat because of the delays and the damage that could occur when importing young plants now. And let's talk about why this matters for food security. When we hear the term food security, we're talking about the ability of a country to ensure that its population has consistent access to safe, nutritious, and affordable food. Anything that disrupts this balance poses a risk to food security, and that's exactly what's happening now as a result of Brexit's new border policies. Produce sellers warn that the delays and increased costs associated with importing plants could lead to shortages, reduced yield, and higher prices for consumers. Several trade associations have pointed out specific risks for different types of crops. The British Tomato Growers Association, for example, has warned that lengthy checks of seeds at the border are threatening their yields. Meanwhile, the Cucumber and Pepper Growers Association reported that significant delays at the border are leading to costly crop delays, which could ultimately mean fewer cucumbers and peppers on UK supermarket shelves. The Fresh Produce Consortium's chief executive Nigel Janney stated that the UK's production of fruit and vegetables depends on being able to import plants without complications at the border. And Janney explained that the UK's glasshouse industry, and particularly the tomato industry, is extremely concerned about the risk of cross-contamination and the impact of these delays on their ability to supply produce. So, what's the government's response to these concerns? The Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, that's the DEFRA, maintains that protecting UK biosecurity is a top priority. They argue that the checks are essential to prevent outbreaks of diseases that could severely harm the UK's food supply, the environment, and even future trade relationships. According to a spokesperson, the government is committed to working with industry partners and trade agencies to minimize disruption while still keeping biosecurity protections in place. DEFRA has also mentioned its ongoing efforts to reset relationships with Europe in hopes of reaching a new veterinary agreement that could smooth over some of these trade challenges. However, the Fresh Produce Consortium and the Horticultural Trade Association are not satisfied with these reassurances. In their joint letter to the government, they've laid out 10 specific actions they believe would help address the problems facing the industry. One of their main suggestions is to agree on a plant health agreement with the EU based on mutual recognition of standards. This would mean that both the UK and EU would acknowledge each other's biosecurity measures, potentially reducing the need for stringent border checks on certain products. The letter also calls for the removal of barriers within the border control post system that prevent inspectors from conducting checks after 5 p.m. Currently, limited inspection hours mean that shipments arriving later in the day are delayed until the following business day, adding unnecessary waiting times for perishable goods. The industry groups have also requested that the government adhere to a 4-hour service level agreement for inspections, which could speed up the process and prevent long waits at border control posts. One particularly controversial request is the removal of the £145 common user charge at the border control post in Sevington and Kent. Sevington processes all checks coming through the Port of Dover and the Channel Tunnel, and this fee is an additional burden on importers. The industry groups are urging the government to suspend this fee for 12 months while it reviews the economic impact of the border policy on businesses. The letter argues that these fees only add to the already high costs of importing produce and are a significant barrier to maintaining food security. If we step back and look at the broader picture, this issue illustrates one of the core challenges of post-Brexit Britain. For many UK citizens and businesses, Brexit was seen as an opportunity to regain control over national policies, including borders and trade. However, the practical reality has been that these new implemented controls and restrictions are creating more complications than anticipated by them. The UK's reliance on imports, particularly from the EU, hasn't diminished overnight, and the border checks have highlighted just how interdependent the UK and EU economies still remain. And the issue with border checks extends beyond plants and produce. It's a reminder that the food supply chain is complex and interconnected, relying on timely deliveries, high-quality standards, and international cooperation. Without smoother trade processes, British consumers could face shortages, but also higher prices and a reduction in the variety of food products available, as it already happened. And as the story unfolds, it will be crucial to see if the government addresses these concerns or if the situation continues to escalate. The warnings from produce sellers and plant importers suggest that the issue of food security isn't just a temporary challenge. It could become a long-term problem unless steps are taken to address the inefficiencies in the current system. To wrap up, post-Brexit border checks have become a substantial hurdle for the UK's produce and horticultural industries. With increased costs, delays, and stricter inspection requirements, businesses are struggling to maintain a steady flow of goods into the country, which in turn affects consumer choice and food security. And this is yet another example of how Brexit has reshaped the daily operations of businesses and the lives of ordinary Britons, with consequences that are likely to reverberate for years to come. Thanks for watching Outside Views, and the next video is right here in the end screen.